The movie opens in a modern city, where archaeologists unearth the tomb of a nobleman. Inside, they discover a deeply romantic love letter. Experts believe the tomb belonged to the Duke of Suo of the Great Liang dynasty. The next day, Anne's best friend drags her to the museum to see the letter. It reads, "All the world suffers from longing, but even in suffering, there are no regrets." Anne scoffs, skeptical that a man from ancient times, with his multiple wives and concubines, could be devoted to just one person. Suddenly, her attention is drawn to a ring displayed alongside the letter. It looks familiar. Back home, Anne finds an identical ring. Strangely, she recites the lines from the ancient love letter. The ring on her finger glows, and the scene shifts to ancient China. A handsome man on horseback rides through a bamboo forest, suddenly ambushed by assassins in black. He draws his sword and fights. Just then, Anne falls from the sky, landing right in the middle of the fight and getting hit by an arrow. An assassin swings a sword at her before she can comprehend what's happening. Terrified, she dodges, shouting, "Is this a movie set?" She runs, yelling for the director to cut the scene. Just as the assassin catches up, the handsome man appears and kills him. Still clueless about her time travel predicament, Anne finds herself facing the man's sword. He stares at her, stunned, seemingly recognizing her. He pulls her into a hug and swiftly eliminates the remaining assassins. And Anne, a modern girl who's never witnessed such bloodshed, faints from shock. She wakes up in a dark cell, realizing with a sinking feeling that she's actually traveled through time. The face of her cellmate terrifies her even more. She learns she's in the dungeon of the Duke of Suo, a man whose name strikes fear into the hearts of everyone in Great Liang. He's a powerful martial artist, known for his aversion to women. At only 28, he holds the position of imperial tutor, wielding immense authority. He's also rumored to be ruthless, torturing prisoners with brutal methods. Basically, everyone in Great Liang turns pale at the mere mention of his name. Anne, terrified, screams to be released. Her cries are loud, but her growling stomach is louder. Moments later, guards drag her to an interrogation room. Overwhelmed by fear, she blurts out her entire modern life. She's 25 years old, from Guangdong, works in Beijing, lives in Sanlitun, is a food blogger, and is utterly bewildered about how she got there. Just as she's about to burst into tears, the aroma of food distracts her. The handsome man calls her name and gestures her towards a table. And Anne is stunned. They have takeout in ancient times. She wonders, maybe he's a time traveler too. She approaches and tries some modern hand signals, but he doesn't understand. He encourages her to eat, and she dives in like a starving woman, even whipping up a dipping sauce, though it's missing sugar. The man offers her some, anticipating her needs. And Anne stares at him in amazement. He asks, "After all these years, your habits haven't changed. Are you still pretending not to know me?" And Anne is utterly confused. He angrily shouts, forbidding her to leave, and falsely claims he's poisoned her wine, forcing her to stay and work as a maid. Anne protests, but fear wins out, and she cleans the courtyard. As she works, she grumbles. Other people time travel, and become princesses or rich heiresses. Of all the time travel scenarios, why am I a maid? She wails. It's all because of that glowing ring. Then, a thought cheers her up. If I find the jade ring, I can go home. But where is it? On the Duke of Suo's finger, of course. And he's busy watching her through the window, a thoughtful expression on his face. No matter how much she pretends to be clueless, I won't let her go this time. He muses. That night, searching for an antidote to the fake poison, and Anne sneaks into his room, masked, rummaging through his belongings while snacking on a chicken leg. She spots the ring and tries to pull it off his finger. He wakes up, sensing her presence, and pins her to the bed with a dagger, ready to eliminate the intruder. But then, he sees her face, and thinking he's dreaming of his beloved, hugs and kisses her. And Anne, furious, yells, "Pervert!" and tries to stab him, but his whispered words of love disarm her. The next morning, the Duke wakes up with Anne beside him, a smile on his face. Then, realization dawns, and he kicks her out of bed. He roars, "Why are you here?" Anne rubs her sore backside. "You were hugging me last night. Now you're acting like you don't know me." The Duke accuses her of lying. Just then, a servant announces it's time for him to dress. And Anne seizes the opportunity. "I'll help you," she chirps, hoping to find the ring while dressing him. Xiao Chu, the Duke, knows she's looking for the ring and dangles it in front of her, refusing to hand it over. This ring proves I don't belong here. And Anne pleads. I can go home with it. Xiao Chu pulls her close and then pushes her away. As she tries to flee, he angrily orders the guards to throw her back in the dungeon. The guard, entering to find this somewhat compromising scene, awkwardly shields his eyes and leads Anne away. Back in the cell, a dejected Anne vows never to eat another bite of the Duke's food. But her resolve crumbles at the smell of grilled meat. Xiao Chu orders her release, and she immediately grabs a skewer, devouring it. He smirks. I thought someone vowed not to eat my food. And Anne retorts. Meat and rice are different. Her shamelessness is clearly a learned skill, honed by observing her captor. Outside, the Emperor's carriage arrives. And Anne dreads returning to the dungeon, desperately hoping Xiao Chu will call her back. Lost in thought, she stumbles, and Xiao Chu catches her. Just then, the guard returns, forcing him to quickly release her. And Anne seizes the chance and escapes. Feeling miserable, she overhears servants mentioning the Emperor and decides to follow them. She loses them and runs into a young boy who scolds her for being lazy. She asks if he knows where the Emperor is. I need to report that pervert Xiao Chu. She fumes. Just then, Xiao Chu appears behind her, making her jump and spit out her water. He bows to the boy and invites him back to the palace. The boy hesitates, but agrees when reminded of the Empress Dowager's concern. Before leaving, he asks Xiao Chu to bring in Aolong. It turns out the boy is the Emperor. Inside the palace, and eyes the antiques, imagining their value in the modern world. Xiao Chu, tutoring the Emperor, confiscates the orb she's trying to pocket. Suddenly, the Empress Dowager arrives, and everyone bows in greeting. Wow, ancient people married young. And Anne thinks, observing the youthful Empress Dowager. Wait, she's not the Emperor's mother. The Empress Dowager, after whisking the Emperor away, gives Xiao Chu a flirtatious look and invites him to stay for dinner. He politely declines. Then, the Empress Dowager sees Anne and gasps. Sister. On the ride back to the Duke's mansion, and asks, Do I really look like your Empress Dowager's sister? You keep mistaking me for someone else. Xiao Chu explodes. You disappear and reappear. What are you playing at? Still confused, and Anne is kicked out of the carriage, leaving her fuming. He may have banished her from the carriage, but he remembers his wife's fondness for candied hawthorns. Sure enough, and Anne is strolling through the market, her hands full of snacks. Spotting some thugs harassing a vendor, she throws a bowl of porridge at them. The thugs attack her, one even drawing a knife. Luckily, Ningwang Prince, Ning and Xiao Chu arrive just in time. How dare you touch my person? Xiao Chu roars. And Anne, not wanting anyone killed, asks him to spare them and let them turn themselves in. Ningwang is impressed by Anne's kindness and courage. Xiao Chu, however, doesn't want any other men near her. He coldly tells Ningwang, The people of my household need no outside protection, and pulls Anne away. Undeterred, Ningwang invites Anne to a poetry gathering at his villa. As soon as she accepts, Xiao Chu's face darkens. He pulls her aside and scolds her, making it clear he doesn't want her talking to other men, especially praising them. Mid-scolding, he spots a candied hawthorn vendor and buys her a whole stick, instantly pacifying her. Delighted, and Anne takes the treat and gestures for her rich husband to join her at the poetry gathering, and Anne eagerly participates in a poetry duel. Ningwang encourages her, and Anne confidently recites lines from Jie Chu's songs, and everyone responds with perfect rhyming verses, much to her surprise. No way! A modern person can't lose to ancient people, she thinks. She tries a few more lines, and the others reveal that Xiao Chu wrote these poems long ago. Ningwang observes. It seems this young lady deeply admires the Duke. She even knows his poems by heart. Xiao Chu looks thoughtful, while the Empress Dowager glances between them. Annoyed, and Anne wonders. Xiao Chu must be from the modern era. How else would he know Belt and Road 5? Just then, the Empress Dowager approaches Anne and asks, Why are you settling for being a maid in the Duke's mansion? Anne puts on a dramatic act, claiming she's being forced. The Empress Dowager doesn't believe her, becoming angry. It's hard to blame her, and Anne looks too much like her sister. She recounts how her sister and Xiao Chu took care of her, enabling her to enter the palace and become Empress Dowager. They were in love, she explains, but her sister vanished 7 years ago. She heavily implies that an Anne is a replacement for her sister. And Anne is furious. Of all the cliché tropes, I'm stuck in a replacement storyline. Suddenly, someone pushes an Anne from the upper floor. Xiao Chu appears just in time and catches her. She stares, dazed, at his handsome face until Ning Wang arrives, asking if she's all right. Before she can answer, Xiao Chu scolds her. You can't even stand without falling. Annoyed, and Anne thinks, I was pushed. I even saw her silver hairpin and pink dress. Ning Wang wants to investigate, but Xiao Chu stops him, saying it's unnecessary. And Anne, feeling dismissed, reluctantly follows him back to the mansion. Despite claiming it's a trivial matter, he secretly orders his guards to investigate. Back at the mansion, and Anne confronts Xiao Chu. Despite his explanations, his harsh words anger her. No wonder you got dumped. Why take your anger out on me? You're cold and heartless. Her words enrage Xiao Chu. He loses control and grabs her throat, his face contorted with fury. He quickly regains his composure and releases her. Tears welling up, and Anne turns and leaves. At the palace, Ning Wang meets with the Empress Dowager and mentions the incident, suggesting she use it to weaken Xiao Chu's power. This would make it easier for her to control him. As expected, the Empress Dowager, obsessed with Xiao Chu and convinced Nan is somehow connected to her sister, agrees to cooperate with Ning Wang. That night, An sneaks around the mansion, drawing a map to plan her escape. She spots assassins and tries to hide, accidentally stumbling into Xiao Chu's room just as he finishes bathing. He starts to investigate a noise when his towel falls to the floor, and Anne, mortified, covers her eyes. The assassins enter, and Xiao Chu, quickly redressing, fights them unarmed. One spot, and Anne attacks her. Terrified, she grabs a vase and hits him, narrowly dodging his blade. Xiao Chu quickly dispatches the other assassin and pulls Anne close. She snaps out of her daze and runs back to her room. Xiao Chu searches for the assassins and finds a token. The next day, the Empress Dowager, sitting with the Emperor, hears about the assassination attempt at the Duke's mansion. The Empress Dowager expresses concern for Xiao Chu's well-being, reminding him of his duty to escort her to the Flower Pagoda for the upcoming incense offering ceremony. Suddenly, assassins attack even within the palace walls. He shouts for the guards and protects the Empress Dowager, suffering a deep cut on his arm in the process. She rushes to his side, worried. Moments later, Ning Wang arrives, feigning concern. Exploiting the situation, Minister Chu accuses Xiao Chu of negligence and asks the Empress Dowager to transfer command of the Imperial Guards to Ning Wang. Ning Wang pretends to decline, claiming he prefers a life of leisure. Once alone with the Empress Dowager, Ning Wang questions her. She agrees only to weaken Xiao Chu's military power, not give it to him. Moreover, she's upset that Xiao Chu was injured, despite their agreement being just a play. Ning Wang, frustrated but resigned, accepts the current outcome. Back at the mansion, and Anne, still puzzled by the push and the assassination attempts, is informed by Hu Qi that Xiao Chu is injured. While Hu Qi fetches hot water, and Anne is tasked with applying medicine to his wound. Clumsy and inexperienced, she struggles, further annoyed by his sarcastic remarks. She storms off, vowing never to serve him again. The next day, Xiao Chu finds Anne in the kitchen, assuming she's cooking for him. She's actually making food for herself. He angrily snatches the bowl and tells her to go hungry. Later, while the Emperor is staying at the mansion for tutoring sessions, a hungry Anne grinds ink beside them. The Emperor, distracted by her hunger, is scolded by Xiao Chu. And Anne defends the young Emperor, earning herself a punishment, copying scriptures alongside him. Once Xiao Chu leaves, she complains about his grumpiness and bonds with the Emperor over moon gazing. He reveals Xiao Chu used to be carefree, but the late Emperor entrusted him with the Emperor's care, changing him. The next day, a furious Ning Wang visits the Empress Dowager. He fears the Emperor's growing fondness for Xiao Chu will jeopardize his plans. The Empress Dowager is unable to prevent the Emperor's tutoring sessions. They decide to visit the mansion under the pretense of missing the Emperor. Upon arrival, they find Anne retrieving a kite from a tree for the Emperor. She slips and falls, caught by Ning Wang. And Anne thanks him. But when he suggests women shouldn't climb trees, she retorts that women can hold up the sky, fight in wars, and even be emperors. They are no less capable than men. The Empress Dowager, hearing these familiar words, drops her teacup and feigns illness, quickly returning to the palace. On the way, she encounters Xiao Chu and asks if he plans to rekindle his relationship with An. He coldly replies that she left him 7 years ago, and they have no connection now. Her return and feigned ignorance suggests she's forgotten everything. The Empress Dowager wonders if her sister has amnesia, or if they are different people altogether. Seizing the opportunity, Xiao Chu questions her about the assassins. The Empress Dowager acts clueless, but falls silent when he shows her the token. And An, hiding nearby, overhears their entire conversation. Seeing Xiao Chu's protectiveness over An, the Empress Dowager tearfully confesses her feelings for him. He cuts her short, refusing to hear it. Later, the four of them have a barbecue. While An chats with Ning Wang, the emperor asks Xiao Chu when he'll reconcile with her. He avoids the question and playfully covers the emperor's mouth with a skewer. Ning Wang, meanwhile, plays the victim card, telling An about his difficult childhood in the cold palace, garnering her sympathy. That evening, Xiao Chu watches Ning Wang's carriage depart, glaring at An. If you like him so much, go live with him. And An simply feels pity for Ning Wang's childhood, unaware of his true cruel nature. The next day, An tries to sneak out but is caught by Xiao Chu. She makes up an excuse about wanting candied hawthorns, but he forbids her from leaving. She escapes anyway and indulges in a mountain of candied hawthorns. With a sugar rush, she climbs a tree and refuses to come down, ignoring Xiao Chu's pleas. He tricks her by saying there are snakes, causing her to fall. He catches her, and once she's safely on the ground, she realizes his trick and fumes. He threatens to use the poison against her, but she refuses to be a substitute for his bright moonlight. Xiao Chu, surprised, she sees herself as a replacement, reveals there was no poison. He only wanted to keep her close. He drags her to the kitchen, pointing out where she made him a birthday cake, prepared a hot pot under the tree, and mixed his special dipping sauce. He even reminds her of the night she got drunk and kissed him under the pavilion. And An is still skeptical. I was only 18 then. I hadn't even been in love. For Xiao Chu, even after 7 years, she hasn't changed. Seeing her disbelief, Xiao Chu's heart aches. He loses control again and carries her back to her room, throwing her onto the bed. He then shows her drawings of them making a heart gesture, further confusing her. He kisses her passionately, and she pushes him away, fleeing to her room. The next day, locked in her room, she asks a servant to fetch the emperor, and convinces him to sneak out of the mansion with her. While waiting for him, she finds herself replaying the kiss in her mind. She snaps herself out of it, determined to stay level-headed. As she and the emperor explore the city, she notices 2 suspicious figures following them. She pulls him into an alley to hide, and to protect him and alert Xiao Chu, she runs out to confront the men. They overpower and kidnap her, taking her to Ning Wang's mansion. She wakes up to find Ning Wang, mistakenly believing he rescued her. He reveals his plan, to use her as leverage against Xiao Chu, and seize the remaining half of the Hufu military talisman. Xiao Chu, learning of An and the emperor's disappearance, is furious and worried. He rushes out with Hu Qi just as the emperor returns, recounting what happened. An arrow flies in, carrying a letter. It demands Xiao Chu come alone to the green bamboo forest at a specific time and hand over Hufu in exchange for An's life. He orders Hu Qi to stay and protect the emperor, entrusting him with the other half of the Hufu, confident he can handle the responsibility. The Empress Dowager tries to stop Xiao Chu from going, but he's determined. He rides alone to the forest to rescue An. Ning Wang, exposed, drops his pretense and uses An's life to force Xiao Chu to surrender the Hufu. As Xiao Chu throws the talisman into the air, Ning Wang's hidden men rush out. Xiao Chu shoots an arrow, causing Hufu to explode in a cloud of smoke. He rescues An, and they escape on horseback. Dismounting, An discovers Xiao Chu is seriously wounded. She cradles him, sobbing. Was it worth it? Risking your life for a replacement like me? He weakly whispers. You're not a replacement. And loses consciousness. At the palace, the Empress Dowager rages, smashing things and accusing Ning Wang of treason. He mocks her, saying she's no match for Xiao Chu and grabs her throat. The emperor and Hu Qi enter, and Ning Wang orders his soldiers to surround them. Later, after a physician treats Xiao Chu's wound, a distraught Anan rushes in, calling his name. He weakly hands her the jade ring, urging her to leave. She refuses, tearfully apologizing and begging him not to die. As he slips back into unconsciousness, she confesses her love for him. The next day, the mansion prepares for Xiao Chu's funeral. Ning Wang arrives with the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. Seeing Ning Wang, An is filled with grief and anger. He pushes her aside to check if Xiao Chu is truly dead. Satisfied, he announces his intention to marry An. She refuses, preferring death. Ning Wang threatens the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, forcing her to agree. During the wedding ceremony, An rips off her veil and accuses Ning Wang of treason. He laughs, admitting his guilt and ordering his soldiers to seize everyone. He forces the Emperor to abdicate and kills a protesting official to instill fear. As a soldier attacks the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, an arrow flies in. It's Xiao Chu, alive and well, entering with his men. Ning Wang, panicking, uses An as a shield. Touch her, and I'll show you what happens. Xiao Chu warns. An bites Ning Wang's hand and escapes. A guard subdues Ning Wang, and Xiao Chu pulls An into a protective embrace. It was all a plan. Xiao Chu, irritated by her wedding dress, wants to rip it off. Seeing her reluctance, he declares, "You can only be mine, and wear a wedding dress only for me." He carries her to the ancestral altar, announcing to his ancestors, "This is the woman I love." Xiao Chu returns the jade ring to An, giving her a choice. If she stays and marries him, he vows to cherish her forever. If she wants to return to her world, he won't regret it, wishing her only happiness and peace. Touched by his heartfelt words, a tearful An accepts the jade ring and agrees to marry him. Xiao Chu, overjoyed, embraces her, and they perform their wedding ceremony before the ancestral altar. Later, they share a passionate wedding night. The following morning, Xiao Chu embraces his wife and tells her of his plans to resign from his position and wander Great Liang with her. Their affection is undeniable. They visit the Empress Dowager and the Emperor to announce their marriage. Xiao Chu asks the Emperor for permission to resign after dealing with Ning Wang's remnants, so he can live a secluded life with his wife. Ning Wang is sentenced to death, but the Empress Dowager secretly frees him, offering him the throne in exchange for Anan's life. She invites An to the palace and drugs her tea. And An, unsuspecting, drinks it all. The Empress Dowager makes her disapproval of their marriage clear. And An retorts that even without her, the Empress Dowager will never have Xiao Chu. The drug takes effect, and An realizes she's been poisoned. She recalls her disappearance 7 years ago, and realizes the Empress Dowager was behind that as well. While Xiao Chu and Hu Qi pursue General Fan, they receive news of Ning Wang's escape and An's kidnapping. Ning Wang delays killing An, intending to use her as bait for Xiao Chu in his planned ambush. Hai Tang sneaks into An's room to help her escape, but Ning Wang discovers them and gives chase. Hai Tang sacrifices herself to allow An to flee. An, heartbroken, escapes as Ning Wang turns his attention to the fireworks, signaling the start of his attack on the palace. As Xiao Chu and Hu Qi enter the palace gates, Ning Wang's archers attack. Hu Qi dies protecting Xiao Chu, who, enraged, fights his way through the soldiers and confronts Ning Wang. An arrives at the gate and calls out to Xiao Chu. The Empress Dowager orders her archers to shoot An. Seeing this, Xiao Chu kills Ning Wang and rushes towards her. Knowing she'll never have him, the Empress Dowager orders her archers to kill them both. Xiao Chu is hit by multiple arrows, but he shields An, pulling her close as they both collapse, their memories flashing before their eyes. The jade ring transports, and back to the present. She clutches the ring, desperately wishing to return. She searches for information about Xiao Chu online and tries to activate the ring with her blood, but fails. After a good cry in the bathtub, she stands on her rooftop, ignoring her friend's pleas to come down. She recites the love letter, and suddenly she's back in ancient times. But something's wrong. She finds Xiao Chu in a brothel, and he doesn't recognize her. And An faints from shock. When she wakes up, she immediately starts scolding Xiao Chu, who is bewildered. He doesn't know her, and even saves her, yet she's furious. And hears the servants call him. young master, and realizes this Xiao Chu is only 21. She traveled back 7 years before their first encounter. At dinner, she eats heartily in front of the younger Xiao Chu, and when he asks her name, she tells him it's An Mo. She claims to be looking for relatives. Xiao Chu chuckles, convinced she's been sent by the emperor to test his suitability for the throne. He shares his dream of traveling to Great Liang and experiencing all it has to offer. An denies being sent by the emperor, but encourages him to pursue his dreams, so his future self won't be burdened by political strife. No one has ever spoken to him like this, and a delighted Xiao Chu, knowing she intends to leave, insists she stay. Cao Er shows An to her room, and she asks about Hai Tang and Hu Qi. Learning they don't exist yet, she sighs. That night, she dreams of Xiao Chu being killed by arrows, waking up in terror. The next morning, she asks about Yuchan, the future Empress Dowager, feigning long-held admiration. Learning that the emperor isn't born yet, and that Ning Wang is in Feng province, she decides to deal with Yuchan first. She asks Xiao Chu to take her to meet Yuchan. The next day, while searching for them, they're invited to a poetry competition by young Master Chu. Xiao Chu initially declines, but when young Master Chu mocks him, saying no one would bet on him, and An jumps in and accepts the challenge. On stage, after young Master Chu recites his poem, a confident Xiao Chu flawlessly recites his own, and An had given him the poem beforehand. He throws her their winnings, telling her to make copies, then takes her to meet Yuchan. As they approach her room, they hear shouting. Yuchan is being bullied by her older sister. They intervene, earning Yuchan's gratitude. She invites them for a meal and encourages An to visit her at the Prime Minister's mansion. Later, An tells Xiao Chu she's leaving. He's reluctant, but agrees. She urges him to live for himself. Just then, someone throws a flower pot from above. Xiao Chu pulls An into his arms, saving her. Safe in his embrace, she's momentarily lost in thought, recalling other times he's protected her. She snaps out of it, determined not to be a burden, and bids him farewell. She checks into a luxurious inn, innocently flaunting her wealth, unaware that the innkeeper is eyeing her. While contemplating how to deal with Yuchan, she hears a knock. It's the innkeeper with tea, snacks, and rat poison. And An stops him, saying she'll handle it herself, and sends him away. She knows the poison is used to kill people. That night, unable to sleep, An decides to poison Yuchan with the rat poison. But before she can act, the innkeeper drugs and kidnaps her, selling her to a brothel. She wakes up the next morning, realizing she's been tricked. Even invoking Xiao Chu's name doesn't convince the madam, who doesn't believe she knows the duke. Resigned, and agrees to learn the ropes. However, when a customer touches her, she slaps him and runs. She bursts into a random room, planning to jump out the window, figuring death is better than this. She's stunned to find herself in Xiao Chu's room. He rescues her and demands an explanation, then punishes the madam. At the Prime Minister's mansion, Yuchan sees a servant in her, thinking it's Xiao Chu and An. Instead, she learns that Xiao Chu is cracking down on brothels and gambling dens because of a courtesan. She scoffs, assuming he's just amusing himself with the city's women. A nanny then invites her to the vegetable garden. When Xiao Chu and An arrive at the mansion, they find Yuchan being whipped by her older sister. An intervenes, but Zhao Yuzhu, Yuchan's cruel sister, tries to whip her too. Yuchan shields, and An, taking the blow. Later, An intends to Yuchan's wounds, despite her earlier intention to harm her. Yuchan, deeply grateful for this unexpected kindness, proposes they become sworn sisters. While watching a play together, Yuchan learns that the courtesan who caused such a stir is an An. They watch the love story unfold with different emotions. And An, thinking of her uncertain romantic future, is lost in thought. Xiao Chu is bored. Yuchan cries at the tragic tale. Later, they argue about love. Xiao Chu believes love can't conquer death, while An disagrees. Back at the mansion, Xiao Chu brings an animal-shaped buns. While she eats, he observes that she's a strange person, sometimes familiar, sometimes a stranger. He can't quite figure her out. And An, trying to figure out how to save Xiao Chu's future self, uses the buns to illustrate a scenario. A puppy and a bunny are in love, but the puppy has a childhood sweetheart, a piglet. The piglet, wanting the puppy, conspires with villains to eliminate the bunny. The puppy eventually escapes, but now they have a second chance. She asks Xiao Chu what the bunny should do. Simple. Xiao Chu replies, "Kill the piglet. Or let the puppy and piglet be together so no one dies." That night, Anne, recalling Xiao Chu's words, resolves to get him together with Yu Chan. One morning, Xiao Chu watches Anne kneading dough, his heart fluttering. He learns she's making him a birthday cake and offers to help, turning the baking session into a playful flour fight. They laugh, covered in flour. And remembers her future husband making her a cake, a pang of sadness hitting her. She asks Yu Chan if she's willing to marry Xiao Chu, knowing she has feelings for him. She encourages and advises her on how to pursue him. A shy Yu Chan is emboldened by Anne's pep talk. On Xiao Chu's birthday, Yu Chan invites them to a hot pot. She gives them gifts, and they enjoy the meal, followed by cake and birthday wishes. And excuses herself, leaving them alone, and sits under a tree, lost in thought. Xiao Chu, however, misses her, and, oblivious to Yu Chan's confession, goes looking for Anne. Meanwhile, a slightly drunk, Anne mistakes a man for the 28-year-old Xiao Chu, and kisses him. The man, surprised at first, kisses her back passionately. And Anne, realizing her mistake, runs away. Xiao Chu, watching her flee, smiles, deeply content. Later, Anne questions Yu Chan about her confession, but Yu Chan just shakes her head. To distress, they enjoy a relaxing bath together. Xiao Chu, happily reminiscing about the kiss, is interrupted by Anne, who calls him to her room. He rushes in, only to find Yu Chan bathing, creating an awkward situation. Seeing his hesitation, Anne tries to shoo them both away, but Xiao Chu easily sees through her ruse. Embarrassed, he retreats, and Yu Chan is left feeling disheartened. A servant then asks Anne to visit Xiao Chu, who's supposedly very ill and refusing medicine. Xiao Chu pretends to be sick, to get Anne's attention. He brings up the kiss, asking if it meant anything. Anne lies, saying she doesn't remember, and uses the medicine as an excuse to leave. He eagerly awaits her return, but it's Yu Chan who brings the medicine, disappointing him. She confesses her feelings again, but he rejects her, saying he only sees her as a little sister, and mentioning he has feelings for someone else. Devastated, Yu Chan runs out, and Anne, hearing what happened, feels sad for her. Later that night, Xiao Chu meditates under a tree, and approaches and snatches something from him. He drowns his sorrows in wine, accusing Anne of ignoring his feelings and wishes. She's so focused on pushing him towards Yu Chan that she doesn't care if he's hurting. He tries to embrace her, but she pushes him away, tearfully explaining that she's doing this because she doesn't want to be involved with him anymore. This leaves Xiao Chu heartbroken. Eating alone, Anne regrets her impulsive actions. She decides to leave. On her journey, she hears that Ning Wang's return was prompted by the emperor's illness and fears of Ning Wang's potential treachery. And Anne thinks that if things don't work out with Yu Chan, she'll deal with Ning Wang. Back at the mansion, she reads something that gives her an idea. Meanwhile, Xiao Chu, distraught, seeks solace with other women, infuriating Yu Chan. She asks about Anne, but he coldly replies that he doesn't know and doesn't care. It turns out Anne has become a servant in Ning Wang's household. While admiring the flowers, she's reprimanded by a guard and Ning Wang himself. To gain his favor, she impresses him with her knowledge of plants. Ning Wang, recognizing her talent, appoints her to care for his orchids. To further test her skills, he takes her to Zhenbao Pavilion to see a rare orchid. On their way, they're interrupted. And Anne, sent to scout ahead, sees someone she'd rather avoid and hides her face. Ning Wang greets the newcomer. It's Xiao Chu. He seems to have figured something out and insists on joining them at Zhenbao Pavilion, much to Anne's dismay. Once there, Xiao Chu teases and provokes her, annoying her immensely. To get back at him, she pours tea only for Ning Wang, angering Xiao Chu. He then uses his authority to make Ning Wang force Anne to pour him tea as well. Just then, the auctioneer presents the jade ring, distracting Anne, and she overfills Xiao Chu's cup. Mortified, she apologizes and excuses herself. Outside, she panics. Why is the jade ring here? What should she do? Determined to protect Xiao Chu and prevent history from repeating itself, she resolves to act. After doing something to the teapot, Anne pours tea for Ning Wang. Xiao Chu also demands tea. and despite Anne's whispered warning not to drink it, he covers her hand and takes a sip. He then pretends the tea is stale and rushes out, and Anne following close behind. It turns out she poisoned the tea, intending to kill Ning Wang. Xiao Chu collapses, and a distraught Anne begs him to wake up, confessing her love for him. He revives, relieved by her confession, and gives her the jade ring. As they embrace, Ning Wang enters. Xiao Chu asks him to take the poisoned tea home, and Ning Wang readily agrees. Back at the mansion, Xiao Chu reveals that Ning Wang was never a traitor, calming Anne's fears. As they share a tender moment, Yu Chan enters, creating an awkward tension. She understands the situation and congratulates Anne before leaving. The next day, Anne learns Yu Chan is being sent to the palace and rushes to Xiao Chu for answers. He explains it's Zhao Yuzhou's doing, upset that her plan failed. Marriages between the emperor and officials' daughters are common, so Yu Chan's selection as a concubine isn't unusual. He suggests that palace life might protect Yu Chan from further bullying, but Anne, determined to help, convinces Xiao Chu to find another solution. Anne visits Yu Chan and advises her to reconsider. She argues that destiny is in one's own hands, convincing Yu Chan to change her fate. They plan Yu Chan's escape during the upcoming temple fair. Anne and Xiao Chu will wait for her at the back gate. Unbeknownst to them, a servant overhears their conversation. Anne reflects that if Yu Chan doesn't enter the palace and become Empress Dowager, perhaps her beloved Xiao Chu won't die, and Yu Chan will have a happier life. On the day of the fair, Yu Chan prepares to escape, but her sister intercepts her, urging her to be obedient. To persuade her, Zhao Yuzhou lies, claiming Anne and Xiao Chu betrayed her. Still unconvinced, Yu Chan is taken to the meeting point to see Anne and Xiao Chu together. Distraught, she uses a hairpin to scar Zhao Yuzhou's face. The next morning, Yu Chan, unable to trust Anne anymore, decides to enter the palace, fueled by anger over her sister's ruined face. Before leaving, she calls Anne sister one last time and accuses her of jealousy, claiming Anne is inferior to her in every way and sabotages her chances with Xiao Chu out of spite. She presents 2 cups of wine, one poisoned. "Didn't you say destiny is in our hands?" she asks. "Let's each drink a cup and see who dies." So, Anne snatches both cups and drinks them both, leaving Yu Chan stunned. Anne explains she wants Yu Chan to be happy and never harm Xiao Chu, reiterating that she'll always consider Yu Chan her little sister. Despite this, Yu Chan remains distraught, determined not to be betrayed again. Back at the mansion, a heartbroken Anne realizes she only has 7 days to live. An oblivious Xiao Chu arrives with candied hawthorns, declaring he'll marry no one but her. And Anne, embraced by him, vows to cherish their remaining time together. The next morning, she wakes him up with a list of 10 things couples should do. They pose for a portrait having an artist draw them making a heart, do each other's makeup, light fireworks, practice sword fighting amidst falling flower petals, and he styles her hair and carries her to eat candied hawthorns. He carries her back to their room to release sky lanterns, but before they can, he's summoned to the palace. The Empress has given birth, and Anne watches him leave, a wistful look in her eyes. The Emperor, on his deathbed, asks Xiao Chu to become regent and help rule, ensuring the young prince and the kingdom are protected. He knows Xiao Chu dislikes politics, and uses the excuse of Xiao Chu's reputation as a playboy to convince him. At the mansion, Anne, knowing her time is running out, releases the sky lanterns alone and collapses under a tree, vanishing. Xiao Chu returns to find a letter from Anne, saying she's left and asking him to forget her. He's devastated. Back in the present, Zhao Mei is reporting Anne's disappearance to the police, when Anne suddenly reappears. Relieved, Zhao Mei helps her up. And Anne searches for Xiao Chu online and finds his death record unchanged. Distraught, she wonders why she couldn't change anything. Clutching the jade ring, she frantically tries to return, ignoring Zhao Mei's attempts to calm her. Reciting the poem, she time travels again. She arrives just as assassins attack the mansion. She subdues one and calls out for Xiao Chu, but a young boy emerges, the 7-year-old Xiao Chu. She's shocked. 28, then 21, and now 7. Hearing fighting, she pulls him away to hide, and then runs out to distract the assassins, giving him time to escape. She tells him not to look for her, and to avoid anyone who looks like her in the future. She confronts the assassins, yelling for Xiao Chu to escape through the back gate. She's fatally wounded and transported back to the present. She tries to search for Xiao Chu online again, as Xiao Mei sighs in exasperation. Despite her efforts, Xiao Chu's fate remains unchanged. He's still killed by Ning Wang. And Anne cries, clutching the ring and reciting the poem, but she can't time travel anymore. She collapses, sobbing uncontrollably, in Xiao Mei's arms. She dreams of an elderly Xiao Chu giving her the jade ring. He tells her to save him, that he's waiting for her, and reveals that he wrote the love letter. And Anne wakes up, ecstatic, hugging Xiao Mei, realizing her beloved isn't dead. She rushes to the museum and reads the love letter. It speaks of their encounters, framed as cause and effect, yin and yuan, or karma. Age 7. Her saving him in the darkness was the cause. His desire to achieve great things was the effect. Age 21. Her tears for him at Zhenbao Pavilion were the cause. Their love and embrace were the effect. Age 28. Their reunion after 7 years was the cause. His hope for a lifetime together was the effect. But their first meeting at age 28 became the cause of his death, the effect. Meeting again at 21 became the cause of his death at her hands, the effect. Saving him at age 7 became the cause of their final separation, the effect. Years later, Xiao Chu realizes he exists in Anne's past, while she travels to his future. After her departure, he spends his life searching for the reason, the karmic connection, but never sees her again. Yet, he vows to wait for her eternally. And Anne finishes reading the letter, tears streaming down her face. She clutches the ring, reciting the poem. Unbeknownst to her, the ring slips from her grasp and a man picks it up. And that concludes our recap of Love Sickness. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you in the next review.